All right, let's begin. Episode 68, where we talk to the most trusted man in New York real estate, Jonathan Miller of Miller Samuels, on his take on the market, where we ask the question, is this the economic hurricane? Will housing weather the storm? Welcome, Jonathan Miller, and my co-host, Roberto Cabrera, and my other co-host, Scott Hobbs. Welcome. Is this a hurricane? It doesn't feel like a hurricane.
No, it's really not.
It's much ado about nothing?
No, it's something.
Yes.
But I think, in describing what's happening now, I think a lot of people use the leftover script from the housing bubble and somehow reapplied it to what's going on today. And I probably said this last time I was with you, but I hate people that say this time it's different, but this time it's different. And hopefully we can explore that on this call.
So housing bubble, you're talking what years, as opposed to the financial crisis, as opposed to?
The great financial crisis, the leading up to the Lehman moment.
2006, 2007?
Yeah, I think, when you think about what is different, what's really different is that inventory is sort of the variable that's changed. When the music stopped during the financial crisis in the housing market, because lenders started using standards, which, by the way, they never lost their mind in this cycle. The joke of, you just needed a pulse or fog and mirror to get a mortgage, like that was never part of any of this. You call it the pandemic era. But when the music stopped during the financial crisis in the housing market, inventory was piled to the sky. And in this situation, what we find ourselves, and I cover over 40 markets across the U.S., and they're all the same, in the sense that inventory is a problem. It's not only low, but in most markets, it was obliterated. That's been my favorite word of 2022, obliterated. And what that does is provide a firm underpinning under pricing. So I think there's a lot of expectations about, with prices are going to drop 30% like they did during the, in 08. Barring another, some sort of external event, that I don't, mathematically, I don't know how that can happen. It doesn't mean that prices won't go down or don't have the potential to go down, but we're really talking about going from 20% growth rate to, either a, low single digit increase or low single digit decrease, sort of in the typical housing market. Obviously, every market is different. But what was interesting is that, we say like housing is local and finance is national, sort of, the mortgage rates are national to a certain degree. Hence the reason for Fannie and Freddie and all that. All markets started doing the same things at the same time. And, so it was rate related, like the war in Ukraine, and other factors, growing inflation and the looming midterms, all those were in play already, but rates, went up.
Let me ask you, because that was one of the things I was really curious to talk to you about, because you cover so many different markets, is that where are pockets which pockets? Is it the metropolitan areas like Chicago, New York that are doing better than the rest of the country? Or what is the general feeling across the country, the way you see it, and who is doing better and who's doing worse, and who maybe is better positioned to do well in the near future?
Right. So I don't see it as a zero-sum game, meaning, if the Midwest is strong, then the West Coast is weak, like as a sort of everything's offsetting. I think, when we think about regions, I think the outlier generally is Florida. I cover, oodles of markets there. And what's a little different about Florida and maybe Texas is remote work. And so what we're seeing is the housing markets in those regions have undergone a restructuring, like not a, they're not, the idea that you can live, for more affluent you are, in theory, the more remote ability you have in your job. I mean, it's not always the case, but it's pretty common. And Florida, when the job cut and Jobs and Tax Cut Act, I can't remember what it's called, but basically the federal salt tax that came in January of 2018, the Florida brokers were like, bring it on. We're going to have this mass exodus from the Northeast. And it was underwhelming. It wasn't that big of a deal. It definitely, there was movement, but it wasn't anything as advertised. And then the pandemic hit and Zoom became ubiquitous in 24 hours. Then it was off to the races. And right now, inventory in 21 markets that I've looked at, inventory right now is about 40, 50, depending on the market, 40 to 50% below levels that existed pre-pandemic. And so and prices are up 50, 60% in aggregate as well. So what you've got is a market that the excess supply was obliterated. For example, the Miami condo market had 5 years of supply. Months of supply was 5 years, basically. And now it's 8 months.
But did that get absorbed from people buying second homes?
So I don't have a great way to delineate between the two, but if I were to estimate, I would say no. I would say that there was a tremendous amount of people that actually changed their domicile to Florida. I'm not saying there weren't a lot of second homes. I'm just saying that it wasn't a bunch of investors. What was different in this cycle is it was primary residences, people living there more than 180 days a year was the logic. And then there's a lot of the sort of the joke in Florida is that New Yorkers are the new foreign buyers, right? And what I'm finding is that a lot of New Yorkers that have come down to Florida think, hey, we can get this cheap. It's not true anymore. It's New York, the influence of New York has definitely raised, the achievable prices. And it's what I find amazing is that, when I think of restructuring, the evidence of restructuring is that the big ticket sales aren't exclusive to Miami and say Palm Beach anymore. They're more spread out because consumers are looking at this as a place to live as opposed to a place to visit.
Right.
Let me back up. I want to recap what I think I've heard. I think the first question we asked is basically, where are we in the cycle? And I think I heard you say that while we might be experiencing a small correction, that a lack of inventory means that we're going to experience across the country sustained increase in prices in the housing industry. And then you talked about two exceptions, Florida and Texas. And we've gotten a little deep on Florida, but it wasn't as if to say those corrections, those are not going to experience, those two places are not
right. I'm not saying
going to experience a correction at all. So while everybody else might experience a minor correction, Florida and Texas, and we've had both of them on the show recently, and realtors in those markets say, yeah, we're not experiencing any correction whatsoever, and we don't expect to. And I say, but how can you continue with 100% growth every 10 years? And they're like, it's simple. In Texas, we've got lots of land, lots of jobs, lots of tech. There's nothing getting in our way.
Yeah, but I'm not suggesting that Florida or Texas, because they're the question was, what's sort of doing better or what's outperforming, which would mean that it's beyond, the rate change. It's something else. And I look at it as, this restructuring because of remote and also low taxes, right? Texas, and Florida in general, we're looking at lower taxes than, say, the East and Northeast and the West Coast.
Wait, are we? If you leave New York and you go down there to Florida, and I don't care whether you're talking Miami, Boca, Palm Beach, anything in the Southeast, desirable cities near an airport, and you spend $6 million, you're going to pay $120,000 a year in taxes. I don't know that there's a great deal of tax savings for the average person. For the super wealthy, maybe, but for the average person, $120,000 a year in property taxes is probably not a tax savings.
You're also equating, you're saying $6 million purchase, average person. That's not the average person either.
No. Well, maybe you don't know who John hangs out with, right?
So. I know he's a.
No, but just for the record, Westchester County has the highest taxes per capita in the country for county property taxes. Florida's are lower, right? So state tax, right? Big difference. And the cost of living in general, even though relative to recent history is much more expensive, but relative to our markets, it's less. I have lots. My son just moved to Fort Lauderdale. My mom moved to Delray Beach. Like, I go visit them. Like, it's cheaper, right? But it's not for everybody. The point is that the Sunbelt states generally, because they're known for cheaper housing, and remote work enables people to work in different locations. They've enjoyed the benefit more than, say, cities to the north. I don't want to overstate that. I'm just saying that it is a difference, but it's not.
You believe that's going to continue for the long term, 10 years?
I think it's possible. I'm certainly not down on, or I don't have any.
And the reason
there's no input to me that says that it's a flash in the pan kind of phenomenon. I think it's restructuring.
As an economist, the reason I brought it up with the $6 million, and you guys can laugh about, the average person doesn't buy a $6 million home. But my point is that when it was a $2 million home, there was a great big gap between the tax situations between New York and Florida. But as the prices doubled in Florida, that tax advantage diminished. Now, maybe I exaggerate, and the average person isn't buying on the water, and they're buying a $2 million. But nevertheless, the tax advantage has diminished in the last 3 years substantially as prices have gone up, and the tax and Florida is dependent primarily on property taxes. So all those people are buying it on a very high basis. And so your mother might be down there on a very low basis, but were you to go down and join her, your tax advantage would be somewhat diminished. And I'm just wondering whether Florida and Texas can continue that growth without that substantial tax advantage. They have to build a bunch of schools, by the way.
What's that?
They're also under-schooled and under-infrastructured.
Right.
In Texas.
No, there's lots of differences.
So it's going to catch up with them.
Yeah, I'm not saying it won't. I'm just saying that there's no immediate sort of red flag that says that it's going to change. Certainly, you have a decade's worth of migration and demand for housing and people coming from more expensive areas. Certainly can be an influence, but there's still an advantage if everything else is fine with you. I personally don't like the hot weather. I'd rather live in the cold weather. So I'm not a Florida man.
Are there parts of the country, as opposed to Florida and Texas, that are particularly suffering or really losing people?
Well, California, certainly been widely, because of the higher than New York, taxes in the country. But their market's really strong still, relative, they're no different than anybody else. For example, in Orange County in the third quarter, bidding wars were 59% of the closings, down from the second quarter when it was 65%, right? So, pick a location. What I find interesting about this market in general is that the narrative is, external event, spike in interest rates, doubling, in nearly a year, and then you have a slowdown in sales, 30, 40, 50, 60% year-over-year drop, remembering that a year ago was a rocket ship. So most of the comparisons should really be made against pre-pandemic levels. Like if you're in the third quarter, you compare to the third quarter of 19 to give you context. Because one of the things I'm learning, with releasing like our monthly contract reports is we're comparing against a rocket ship. And, my whole career has been year over year, get rid of the impact of seasonality and focus on apples and apples. But the problem is that 21 was this juggernaut and we're comparing against that. So it's overstating and I think making the market sound weaker than it actually is. And in many ways, activity, when we say something like a market is down 50%, year over year, but the Hamptons, sales are up 100% the year before, right? So there's a lot of missing context from the real estate sort of story. And when you look at national news on housing, it's all about like gloom and doom and but it's all year over year. Like it's this narrative that was taught or learned from the financial crisis and it's being applied now. I'm not sugarcoating. It's clearly a slowdown, but you're slowing down
from such an extreme high.
Right, but I don't think the consumer, when they read this stuff, really sees that. I'm not being Pollyanna here, but it's like that impact is probably going to go away in 6 months. The skew from the year over year, but it's definitely sort of exaggerating, I think, the weakness of the market. When you still have bidding wars in certain markets, like how is that weak? It's just slower. It's still, when you have a shortage of inventory, typically in a slowdown where you have a period of rates rising, you don't have a lack of inventory, like at least in my lifetime. And that's what you have now because rates were too low for too long, a good year at least.
Before we lose Scott had a couple of questions, I think.
Sure.
No, I was just sort of, I'm listening along under a couple of these things. I think one of the other potential differences inside of this market is the real kind of push among like private equity buyers and Airbnb taking a lot of inventory off the market. Are you able to see effects?
Yeah, actually, I just read that the New York City Council is, I think on January 9th, they're coming out with a whole slew of new laws and severe punishment for Airbnb landlords that don't do things as they're supposed to do. And that has been a big reason for the rental market in New York. We just published today for Douglas Elliman a our rental report. And what we found is that rents peaked in July, and typically, the high point of the rental market is at the end of the summer. Prices drifted lower, but not very much. And in fact, we're now 4 months past that. 3 months in a row, they fell. Rents drifted lower, and then they just shot up again to I forget, the second or third highest median rent in history. And so this idea that, the rental market is still tight because you have people priced out of the purchase market because of high rates or just affordability, and they're going into the rental market. And I was sort of saying, when we peaked in July, the opposite of rising rents is not falling rents, it's stabilizing rents. And there's some sort of affordability threshold at a very high level that rents are sort of stuck at right now and continue to be. And part of that, and that's just Manhattan, but part of that is, like you said, Wall Street becoming single family landlords, and Airbnb as a market force, is pervasive. And these are factors that are creating, or exacerbating this lack of supply, on top of people being wedded to their mortgage rates. Like people that refied or purchased the last 3 or 4 years, they're wedded to their rate. Like they don't want to become buyer, because they'd have to give up the rate, right? So over time that eases, but initially, and with all the the uncertainty of rates rising and the past midterms and the war in Ukraine and inflation and there's all this stuff. People are just sort of sticking to what they've got and waiting or pausing.
Where does that go? Where does that go? I love this concept of all this stuff. So the war in Ukraine, a slowdown in the Chinese economy, rising interest rates, energy could go either way because it's being manipulated by the global wars. But and the backdrop is that many of us are handcuffed to our 30-year rates down at 2% and 3%. So we're not selling our places. We're going to have continued low inventory across the country, and maybe rates continue to stay high because the Fed has to keep rates high in order to counteract all that liquidity,
inflation, all that
inflation as a result of all that liquidity. So where does all this go?
So I think over time, that sort of stranglehold on staying with your low rate erodes, and people start life demands changes, and as you remove each one of those sort of bundles of uncertainty, more people go out. It's sort of a gradual sort of game. So I see it sort of the slow motion release. Like right now, and I'm not suggesting this is going to happen. In fact, I positive it's not going to happen. But let's just say the Fed cut rates tomorrow. Like they just cut just a 1/4 point or a 1/2 point. Do you know how much demand would be unleashed? And it's still, the rates are twice, what, the Freddie Mac numbers came out today, and it's like 6 1/4. I forget exactly what it was, but it was at 7, touching 7 the last 3 or 4 weeks. They've been falling because the pipeline's low and banks have been enjoying this huge spread, and they're getting down to reality again. So even if there's another rate increase, mortgage rates may not go up much at all. It's the lack of movement by the Fed, I think, that removes one of these sort of uncertainty items. And as we keep removing those from the basket, more people take action.
It's also behavioral. People get accustomed to what the environment is. It's like, you know, it's raining outside. You eventually have to go to work. You've got to go deal with your life. So you have to, these are the circumstances, and you have to start to participate in it. And, you know, of course, the sellers will have to be, it's all, I think it's the market activity is all in the hands of the sellers. If they are serious sellers and they price properly, the demand is there, and everything will sell.
Yeah, that's why you're still having bidding wars. Not nearly as many as you were, but in some markets you are having a lot. Not so much in New York Metro. In fact, one of the things that we can see in the New York Metro area, and I had a chart on this in my newsletter last week, is new inventory coming into the market is slowing. Like it's slowing, meaning that, you know, inventory, you know, while it's expanding at a slower rate, and, you know, which just exacerbates the problem. What it means for sellers in general is that it just provides a much firmer underpinning during all this on pricing than it normally does. You know, like when you have
are we still short 5 million homes across the country?
So there's a lot. So that, yeah, that's the numbers. That's what they're saying. You know, that's what I've read, you know, top level. 5 million.
One person made that up, and we keep repeating it.
I know. It's actually one of the things that to be a little contrarian is that also, you know, there's been a lot of multifamily development for rentals, right? A lot of apartment buildings. You go in anywhere, any city in the US, you see the same kind of buildings all over the place. Like there's been this massive boom, and yet everybody's saying, hey, rents are really high, we got to build more. And I don't disagree, but actually the demographics are changing in the US. Like supposedly 75-80% of the millennials that were going to like leave the nest after the pandemic, they've already done so. Like there's only like a quarter of them left. It's not like this huge untapped market. And one of the things they do to start a household is to rent. And the feeling is that we're way overbuilt on multifamily rental, and rents will come down in a few years in a meaningful way, unlike right now. But that's like a few years down the road.
Wait, we're overbuilt on multifamily rentals, but we're underbuilt on what, single family homes?
Well,
we're not going back there. We're not putting that genie back in the bottle.
No. And the problem with single family is that a lot of the growth in single family has been skewed to luxury or high end, like the Toll Brothers, as opposed to affordable middle class housing. I mean, basically, the spike in rates has screwed, pardon my French, the middle class, like for affordable housing nationwide. You know, not so much the luxury buyer or the luxury seller, but it's been the middle class because they have less resources. So, and ideally are less remote than wealthy. As I said before, the wealthier you are, the higher your net worth, the greater the probability that you have more flexibility with remote work. Doesn't mean, you know, it's not an ironclad rule, but the way I look at it, the wealthy have less sort of restrictions on where they can work.
Have you seen any effect from the foreign buyers of any sort, especially even just a little bit, because the dollar kind of peaked at around in October and it's kind of come off a bit?
Yeah, the dollar was like equal on par with the euro, which is crazy. So the short answer is no. I haven't seen anything. You know, it's one of those, like every decade there's like the dollar's weaker and you have this currency play going on and foreign buyers everywhere. we really lost, since like 2013, that has not been the story. So maybe we're due, but it sure doesn't look like the dollar is going to soften significantly. At one point, like in the UK, it was a 50% discount to buy in the US, and the euro was like 40%, 35% discount. That's gone, or right now. It just ebbs and flows, right? And you have periods where it is, periods where it isn't, and right now it isn't.
Can I ask you something about you do appraisals? So has your volume, just because refis are down, I would imagine a lot of deals are cash deals because people are just, those are the people who are buying to take advantage. Has the volume of your appraisal business contracted a bit because of what's happening?
So the answer is the volume of our appraisal business that's related to interest rates has fallen sharply. That's about a third of our company. The other 2/3 are everything else. Now, a lot of litigation support. We do a lot of appraisals for matrimonial. We just people, we just love people suing each other because that gives us something to do. No, but we do a lot of litigation, weird things like people suing because the Starbucks wasn't vented properly and the entire apartment smells like Jamaican Blue Mountain, and we just do create, tap dancer on the floor above. What's the damage of the sound not being properly, like just crazy stuff. The value of a dumb waiter.
Value of hallway space.
Lots of hallway space. We work for the boards directly. When people are combining apartments, we do a lot of that. Roof rights, not air rights, but someone owns a terrace, but the shareholder is, as a shareholder, they're only allowed to keep it as a terrace, right? They can't put a greenhouse sort of temporary structure unless they buy that right from the co-op. We value that. So we do a lot of oddball.
You don't do air rights?
Not air. That's more of a commercial. We're more residential. We do roof rights, which are, you have the airspace to put a greenhouse in over a terrace. That's what we do. So it relates to the rights of the co-op board or corporation more than it does worry about compliance with building zoning, the zoning resolution. So, but the rate stuff is way down. In fact, a lot of people don't realize that the refi volume in banking is massively higher than contracts or sales when rates are competitive. Refis are just, they dwarf, in terms of mortgage appraisals, they dwarf purchases. But now, they're much more volatile too, right? When rates spike, refi volume collapses.
Their volumes must be just decimated.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layoffs at banks for their processing back of the house kind of operations. And I think that's partly why you're seeing mortgage rates drift lower, despite what the Fed is doing, because they have to
loan that money.
They've got to do something, or they've got to make a decision. That's pretty common. A common challenge for banks right now.
I've got one for you. We've been talking about some of the major factors that have been driving the real estate economy over the last 5-10 years. And we've talked about the Fed actions. We've talked about work from home, COVID, and how it's dramatically changed the New York real estate market. It got worse, it got better. One thing we have not talked about whatsoever is crypto. Now, crypto, was this great big factor a year ago. There was all this newfound wealth made from crypto, and it was finding its way into real estate, and it was driving up prices. And then
especially at the very high end.
Yeah, and then now
yeah.
all of a sudden nobody's talking about crypto and using crypto to, you know, buy a house and all. Are we just not writing stories about it? Is it still out there? Is it, you know, what has been the effect of crypto on the real estate market, and is it going to continue?
Well, I think it's you know, it's had a nominal impact, but it's you know, it's not like it was when you have you know, the prices collapse, you know, 60, 70, 80, 90%, depending on the type of currency. You know, one of the things, you know, versus like a fiat currency like the dollar is trust, right? And it's just like the housing market too. Like consumer, you know, wants to trust that the market isn't going to go into a black hole tomorrow. You know, and so, you know, they're more nervous, more cautious. I find it hard to believe that it'll go away. I think Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase called crypto pet rocks because, you know, it's a
is it fair
because
to say
banks are very anti, you know, like some of the banks are very anti because it's kind of a threat to them in terms of, you know,
Jamie has been down on crypto since the beginning, but is it fair to say that all that crypto wealth found its way into high-end LA, New York, Florida, and Texas real estate and caused extraordinary prices in those markets? And that had a ripple effect in those markets on everything else around it. So once you started selling 10 and 20 and $30 million apartments in LA and in New York because of crypto, everybody started to think, and in places like Austin, Texas, people started to say, oh yeah, that's normal. So now when we interview the folks in Austin, Texas, and we say, is it going to continue? And they say, oh yeah, of course. Have they forgotten that some of the drivers that we had, like COVID, like massive liquidity, and by the way, crypto, are not there anymore, driving those real estate prices? When my friends left New Canaan and went down to Austin and said, what can we get for the $2.5 million we just got from our pristine 5,000 colonial on 2 acres? Pristine. They found that they got a 1970 fixer-upper in Austin, and they were so bummed out they had to settle for Dallas. So I ask you, for all those people who are priced out of the Austin market and had to settle for Dallas, can it continue?
It's helped Dallas.
Right. So, so I first of all, I'm reminded of, you know, that saying, John, if I've told you once, I've told you a million times, don't exaggerate. And so
those are real numbers. Those are real numbers.
So crypto, the influence on high-end real estate, you know, is anecdotal. You know, it's very hard to really know. I think that's a matter of time before we will know more, because we certainly know cash versus financing, you know, mortgages and things like that. I think it was exaggerated, that its impact was exaggerated, but, you know, maybe under, you know, just because people like me that thinks it's exaggerated is that we just aren't tangibly seeing, you know, the actual evidence of it, and it's all sort of the crypto bros telling you, you know, this is the future, and, you know, we're accounting for a huge swath of the market. Very high profile transactions, you know, were people that, you know, cashed out, no question about it. In fact, when I was being interviewed for yesterday for the rental report that was published today, someone said, are rents still high in Manhattan, you know, because the crypto wealthy have left the purchase market because they're now poor? You know, and I said, I don't think so. You know, moving from
represents like 0.4% of like the invested. It just does not. John, have you
it's a nominal.
John, have you experienced any crypto deals or anything like that? I haven't. None. There was one, I remember, was one advertisement for a townhouse, and in the small print at the bottom said, crypto would be considered, or something like that.
Right.
No, but all of the investment bankers I know out here in Connecticut, hedge fund managers, they work for the big banks in New York, they all had crypto investments. They would say, yeah, I've got a stake in Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin was at 50,000, they were feeling good. And now it's at what, 16,000? And it has to have an effect on whether they're considering a trade up in their real estate.
I think they were such tiny parts of people's portfolio. And one of the reasons why the price went up so high is because it became popular. And people they were just more people saying, I need to have 1% in my portfolio. So that created the volume, and that put the price pressure up. That's what I think happened.
Yeah, the way I look at it is like, if you get to the point where you're saying, hey, this really tangibly impacts the market, and the narrative is all anecdotal, at some point I'd like to see something tangible. You can believe it, and I'm not saying that it's not more of an influence, but I think it's oversold to a large degree as being a major force. You remember the stop signs or the stoplights when you're driving more than you do the green lights. And, I think now with this sort of big, sort of red light in crypto, people are looking back and, maybe it wasn't as big of a factor as what was thought. I don't know. It's a good question. I think we'll know more about it in the coming years. I don't think it's going away, but I don't know if it's kind of like the parallel for me is iBuying. That was a deep pull. Like I really pulled that out of nowhere. The iBuying was like, oh my God, when you read about it, it was like, it was going to be 90% of the market. It was just going to be, everything was going to be iBuyer, right? And then one by one, right, the math just didn't pencil out. And, and it's going to end up being, 5-7% maybe of the total market nationwide, maybe, because no one's making any money. I feel like that's an important part of having a sustainable firm is you actually have to generate a profit at some point, in a consistent way, and in a down market. So the hype over iBuying, it's a factor in the market, but it's not what it was before when all the hype was at full speed.
So what do you, just looking forward, and we kind of talked about it, like we don't see, we're not really, Manhattan didn't move a lot price-wise.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of place for it to move anyway. And we have extremely high rents. We have very low inventory. The big question among all the brokers I talk with, they're talking every day, is the big question is how the inventory is eventually going to start to flow through. But is it going to come early? Is in January, like late January, February, are we going to start to see that big flow or not? Is it going to be in spring? Is it not going to happen at all? I mean, I have to believe
it's your fault if you don't remember
that have pulled their properties off the market for sure, because just kind of waiting.
There was just a Redfin report about delisting, that there's just a tremendous amount of people that have pulled their listings from the market. So I think, seasonally, we'll probably see a little bit more inventory seasonally, come into the market at the beginning of the year, but I don't see it as a tsunami or, massive wave, unless rates are cut, is the way I think of it.
But those people have no place to go, right? So we're going to have less inventory than normal this spring, aren't we?
I agree. Yes, I agree.
Which will support price.
Yes, exactly. Right. That's my whole point. And I actually think that if you're a broker in Manhattan, apologies, John, because Manhattan was interrupted by the Fed moves in the beginning of the year, and Manhattan was 9 months behind the rest of the region because of the pandemic or the vaccine. It basically turned Manhattan back on in early 2021, and the suburbs had already been booming for 9 months by the time sort of Manhattan kicked in. The rate moves by the Fed in the last spring sort of interrupted that cycle, and our inventory, while I don't want to say, like, our inventory is not rock bottom low relative to the suburbs. Fairfield County, Westchester, for example, Nassau, Suffolk, like, their inventory is like, just because this number sticks out of my head, Long Island at the peak when inventory was at its highest during the housing bubble, it was 26,000. Now it's 6,000, up from 4,000, right? It went from 4 to 6, which is a big jump. But relative to 26,000, it's incredibly low. And I think that's the logic across the metro areas, that inventory, even if it rises, is still really low.
There were so many people that were going to John's neighborhood. They were going up to Connecticut. Manhattan has become so expensive that I'm keep reading it. There are people that are just leaving, but they can't go to John because John's got nothing for them.
Yeah. I think kind of like what I was, the other topic I was talking about, where I think it's just over time, like it's a gradual thing. Eventually sellers loosen their hold on why they're staying. But I don't think that's like next quarter. I think this is over the next year or two. I think we're looking nationally at it's the same nationally, that inventory is extremely limited. Another way to look at it, I can't remember if I mentioned this last time we spoke, but think of inventory as this living, breathing blob that's based on life cycles of the occupants, and then you take rates being way too low for too long and obliterate that supply, and forget new construction. That's like 10%, like just existing property. To have that come back in quickly is hard. It's very low because when you sell, you have to become a buyer, right? And sort of we have this sort of lockup going on right now. So this is about pricing. This is about affordability more than anything.
Do these dynamics help the small town, Omaha, Nebraska, Des Moines, places where people are like, look, I can make a living there for a lot cheaper, and I can actually make a life for myself there.
Sure.
But you can't get there. You can't get there.
I agree.
Right. I mean, sure. Anything's possible. We are seeing more of that, but I think that's more of the outlier, to think about.
We learned that in our Montana show. They only go if they're within an hour of an airport. So you can only move to some place that's within an hour of an airport. And people, when you talk to our Vero Beach show, they're like, well, let me tell you how many flights there are to New York per day.
Right.
And so that's still the driver of most of these real estate markets.
Yeah. Accessibility.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I was going to tell a good Nebraska joke, but I won't. I'll keep it.
Oh, please.
No, I just, it's the only one I know about Nebraska, and I love Nebraska. I love the Cornhuskers. But what does the N on their helmet stand for?
Nobody. I don't know.
Knowledge. Anyway, someone from Omaha told me that. That's why I thought of it. So.
Good.
So what does normal look like going forward? I want to say that if I try and close my eyes and forget about COVID and forget about the Texas boom and the Florida boom, that normal looks like 5% growth. and that what we might be doing is starting to see, again, a more normal trajectory of 5% growth in the housing market and 5%, 6% interest rates in the next couple of years, and 5% growth, because we're not going to see a decrease because there's still scarcity of real estate. We have scarcity in New York, we have scarcity in Austin, and we have scarcity in Connecticut. So everybody still has some scarcity. And so despite, and they're tied to their old mortgages. So we're going to see scarce inventory. We all agree on that. Everybody on this show agrees. We're not going to see a boom in inventory, and we're not going to see major changes in interest rates any longer. They've already hit 7. They've come down to 6, and they'll float somewhere between 5 and 7. Probably for the next couple of years. So how does this play out? What do I tell my 26-year-old kids, my 20-year-old kid, my 18-year-old kid? How old's your child, Roberto?
11.
11. What does he tell his 11-year-old? Is there any optimism for an 11-year-old right now in the real estate market?
Sure. Listen, I have 4 boys, 3 are homeowners. 2 sold their homes 2 months ago. Both were in Connecticut. One moved to Boston, one moved to Fort Lauderdale, and because of job opportunities. And one of my, affordable houses, and one had 80 people walk through it like a month ago, because this limited supply. One only had 30 people walk through it. During the housing bubble itself back, 15 years ago, I asked myself that question, like, what do I tell my kids? Like, if they could be able to become homeowners, and they did. So I don't know, like there's always this sort of trope in society of like, it's just, you can't afford, like, I've had friends, with young kids, 20 years ago say, I don't know what to tell my kids, like they're not going to have the American dream. And, and my friend has 3 kids, and all 3 of them are homeowners. I don't know. The long-term prognosis for that is just be optimistic. Affordability is clearly always a challenge. And, but I'm not writing any of that off. So many things change. Just look at what's changed in our lives in the last 3 years. It's sort of insane how we're doing things. I mean, I'm talking to you remotely with a whole bunch of people. Like, prior to the pandemic, I wouldn't be doing this unless it was in person, right? So I'm not smart enough to sort of prognosticate. My crystal ball is held together with duct tape. But I'm still optimistic about.
So is my 5% prediction? Does that sound reasonable?
No, it sounds high.
It does.
I think yeah, it's more like 3, just ahead of inflation.
Is that true in New York, Connecticut, and Florida?
I'm not sure. I'm not saying 5 is wrong. I'm just more comfortable with something that is a little bit ahead of inflation. It sure looks like inflation, when it settles back down, is going to be more like 3.5% as a standard, because we're not going to backtrack on wage growth, which has been a deflationary force in the economy since the 60s. And during the, when wages came back during the pandemic and people were focused on quality of life and quitting their jobs, I think the net result of that, even as a business owner, I think it's a good thing. And so I think we're going to have to reset our bearings on a little bit higher inflation in our economy and our lives. But it's going to be like, it's going to be 3.5 versus 2, right? And that's why I think growth in real estate, in my mind, always just sort of edges out in aggregate, edges out inflation. And that's my logic.
So I'm going to borrow money at 7% this year to buy my first home, and it's going to appreciate at 3%. That's what we're in for the next few years, right?
Yeah, I think
well,
so.
Inflation's higher than that now. If we're
But
talking
it's coming down. It's coming down. It's coming down, and a lot of supply chain has basically gone away. A lot of the challenges, a large part of them have gone away. So I think by mid 23, we're going to be looking at 3.5% inflation. But you're right? You're borrowing the money at a higher rate. I think you're going to end up borrowing the money in the mid fives. I think that's where mortgage rates are going to settle in, and frankly, I hope they don't go down to 2.5% in my lifetime, because that's created the havoc that we're going through right now. It just doesn't make sense.
I hope they settle a little bit lower than. I hope they settle like 4.5 to 5.
Yeah, a year ago, I was sort of complaining that, publicly in a lot of my writings, that mortgage rates should be in the fives. That, nothing good comes out of, it's like, the idea that mortgage rates, low mortgage rates save you money has been, is not accurate. It's out of context. Like, think about housing prices just went up 20% nationwide, right? 20 to 40% nationwide, right? So yeah, rates were half, but sellers aren't dumb, right? They know the buyers can pay more. So like mortgage rates, to me, low mortgage rates or falling rates is only good when you've agreed on a price and then the rates fall even lower and you're able to take advantage of it, as opposed to a blanket statement like low rates make housing more affordable, but there's a delay and then prices escalate rapidly. So that's my take.
It's about monthly cost versus end value.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, just the brushstroke statement that, hey, low rates are more affordable means you're operating in a vacuum and you're not looking at the other parties in the transaction that are saying, yeah, rates are lower, they can pay more for my house. Is the way I look at it. I'm not being, deliberately negative here. I'm just saying, like, low rates are not a good thing. And in fact, I say now low rates made housing less affordable, because it obliterated supply, which made prices rise.
In my monthly newsletter, I show the difference of what for a while I showed what the difference of what 1 or 2% made in your payments, and I kept in my newsletter I kept reminding sellers, like, as interest rates go up, you got to try to sell now, because as interest rates go up, they don't have the wherewithal to pay you what you want them to pay.
The sellers have to adapt too, right? It cuts 100%. Both ways.
Yep.
You're right. You're totally right.
So we're running out of time, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out Housing Notes. I love Housing Notes.
Thank you.
And everybody who is not subscribed to Housing Notes ought to be. Housing Notes is Jonathan Miller's Friday rant.
Right, Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's the way to clear my mind of all the clutter that I've accumulated during the week so I can function on the weekend and start all over again every Monday.
There's a little bit to do with real estate and a lot to do with everything else that you love, like the Beatles.
Right.
Whatever you might see on,
and taking down, I'm actually trying to take down basically a federal agency right now in my profession, and it's working. And
I've noticed.
I've been like relentless, and it works. I'm getting feedback from Washington. So
why don't you tell us all what's going on? Because I've been curious about that. You've devoted a good deal of ink in your blog and your Housing Notes for the governing body of appraisers nationally.
The Appraisal Foundation. And so just real quick, like, this is instead of the 5 hour.
And you talk about them like they're FIFA, right? They're like FIFA.
Yeah, they are bad news. Bad news. So when you I'll condense this 5-hour conversation into 2 minutes. So like brokers, appraisers have to have licenses. And really the reason when we're licensed, we agree that we're following USPAP, which is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And because of the way my industry is set up, and I'm sure many brokers on this call have experienced that they're interacting with people that they've never seen before, that don't know anything about the local market. They're coming from far away. They're the low bidder from a bank. Like the whole thing has been sort of tossed up in the air. And one of the biggest problems is that there's a shortage of us. And the reason is because you basically have to agree to work for 2 years for nothing and then get a license. But then people don't want to train you because in 2 years you're going to leave and go off on your own, and you're paying for somebody that, banks won't accept the appraisal from a trainee, even though it's legal. But from the financial crisis, trainees are less than appraisers. So anyway, my industry, I'm the poster child for my industry. Our industry is 98% white and like 75% male. And this agency set up the rules that have perpetuated this. And all I'm doing is focusing on this because you've got to have more people in there. The median age in our industry is over 60. That's not a good thing. And automation is terrible. And a lot of the banks have gone to automation. You think an appraiser is off, think of the Zestimate. Oh, did I tell you last time the Zestimate accuracy thing? Anyway, just real quick, I'm a nonlinear person, so I'm bouncing off of the appraisal profession to Zestimate. But just one thing I think many of you don't understand or haven't heard. So we know the Zestimates are sort of hit and miss because they're reliant on the quality of public record and other inputs, and it varies across the municipalities. So nationwide, the Zestimate compared to what the property eventually sells for is accurate within 2%. That's the median accuracy rate. So people look at that and go, wow, 2%, that's really good. Okay, so it's the median accuracy rate, which means that 50% of the time it's within 2% and 50% of the time it's not. So it could be 99% off 50% of the time, right? So you look at that and go, okay, so it's 2%, 50% of the time. However, that's only if it's listed for sale. If it's not listed for sale, it's 7%. So the median accuracy rate is 7%, which means that 50% of the time it's within 7% and 50% of the time it's not. Now, what that's telling you to go from 7 to 2 is that the Zestimate is reliant on you guys to price the property first, right? That's insane. And everybody thinks, oh, you just take it verbatim. They literally need you to get to a respectable number. And then all they do, and they actually, a few years ago, they changed their algorithm to make the Zestimate more reliant on the list price. It's junk. So anyway, I'm sorry, I had to get that off
If
my
the
chest.
Zestimate says $1,085,000 and I put it out there at $2 million, the Zestimate changes instantly to $2 million.
Exactly. Right. They changed the weighting on the listing on the asking price, so it literally is garbage. And
but by doing that, now I want to. The customer says list my house at 2.4 because
right, and then the
Zestimate will follow it right up there. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I just sold my house in Fairfield
No
County.
wonder iBuying died.
Right. I just sold my house, and for like 5 years, they priced my house at like 500,000 less than what it actually sold for. But the minute I put it on the market, it magically went up to what my asking price was the next day. Like the market is that fluid. Like it went up 500,000 in one day. And then when I sold my house, and since I've sold my house, it's staying right at that number, like, plus or minus a couple of fractions of a percent.
As a guy who needs to price houses all the time, do you like CoreLogic or any of the other valuation tools better? I mean, I go look at what the Zestimate is, and then I go look at CoreLogic.
Well, the only reason you should be looking at the Zestimate, I don't discourage that, is because the seller is looking at it, and you need to understand it. If it's right, it doesn't mean that it's a good, it's a good tool. It just means, it's a coincidence, like it's right. So use it. And in some markets, it's more consistent with or for a moment in time, it's more consistent with what prices really are. You may agree with it. And then other times it's not. But you want to know about it. So I don't use any of those tools to price ever. There's so much that goes in behind it that it's, like it doesn't know that, this house had 50 feral cats in it for 10 years, right? It doesn't know that. Even if I renovated a bathroom and there's that's in public record, 50 feral cats, 500 feral cats, it doesn't know. It was never intended. I was actually on the industry advisory board for Trulia before it was basically acquired, before they had a website and before it was acquired by Zillow. And I saw how the sausage was made. And it is so generic. It was designed to be fun for consumers to say, hey, my teacher in college, her house is worth $4 million. Or this loser buddy of mine, he's got a $10 million house now on a lake. Like, I'm the loser now. You can see all that stuff that was made to be fun. That's what it was. No more. It's morphed into something that people take seriously.
It's ironic that Zillow took it so seriously that they got into iBuying and started buying houses based on those estimates.
But they did that because they were worried about losing ground to Open Door, and actually, they tweaked the algorithms, and were like reading their own press releases, and did themselves severe damage to that space, and I think shocked the world into realizing that there isn't that precision. I've always contended that iBuying only belongs in like a Levittown, like a homogenous market where, every house in the neighborhood is the same, barring maybe the color of the paint or whatever. And not for just any house. Like, the housing valuation is not robotic, and I think that's what their problem was. Zillow was doing it everywhere, and it made no rhyme or reason.
So, final question because we're way over, but I'm enjoying this so much, so it doesn't matter.
Sure.
What is every realtor and economist hoping for Christmas this year? Are we hoping for a Fed cut to the rates? Are we hoping for a good jobs report? What are we hoping for? Decrease in the price of oil? What are we hoping for to stimulate our industry and have a good start to 2023?
Well, first, I'm hoping for peace on earth.
Okay, that's a good one.
I'll take that. So what I would love to see is, I don't know how you'd wrap it, but I'd love to see a a definitive sign that the Fed was done, and then begin the waiting process of when they'll eventually cut, because that's the wild card. For Christmas, I'd love to feel comfortable that this ratcheting up of rates is coming to an end.
That we've hit the peak.
Yeah, and we kind of know we have, but like it'll be when they skip a Fed meeting and without a rate increase. So that's what I want for Christmas.
Okay, me too.
Yeah,
I want to box a bunch of apartments just to come flying out.
Yeah,
you want more inventory, Roberto?
That's what I want. I want to open a box and they just come zinging out everywhere.
I just want the rate thing removes a variable that when time passes, more people feel comfortable about putting their home on the market or thinking about making a move. I think that's like the first step, and peace on earth would help.
Roberto, on my way home from the airport on Friday, I got that present early, that early Christmas present. Guy called me up from Texas and he said, I have 5 properties in New Canaan and I just want to know, should I sell them individually or as a bundle? 5.
Wow.
Was that from our program?
Maybe. I don't know.
That's fun.
Jonathan, thank you so much.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
Anytime.
Anytime.
For us to get our hands and grab you and squeeze you for everything you know. So
yeah,
really,
no, it's a pleasure. I learned from you guys as well. It's helpful feedback for me. And like we said earlier, if you want to sign up for my housing notes that comes out tomorrow at 2:00, you just go to my website, which is millersamuel.com. It's free and it's easy to unsubscribe if you find my dad jokes annoying.
No, I love them. I love it. What's your favorite Beatles song?
Boy, that's a loaded question. I don't.
I guess
she came in through the bathroom window.
All right,
riff on Abbey Road.
All right, with that, thank you everybody, and
thank
good night.
Thanks for having me. Take care. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.